Tonight, we're not here to believe, and we're not here to debunk. We're here to test something harder. When people see something in the sky that makes no sense, is it just a trick of distance, angle, and sensors, or is it a real unknown? Over the next few minutes, we'll reconstruct and investigate 3 of the most famous UAP cases in modern history. And we'll do it the only honest way. First, the strongest reason it could be extraordinary. Then, the strongest reason it could be ordinary. Because the real question isn't, do you believe? It's, what would actually convince you? First, UAP simply means unidentified. It's a label for a question, not an answer. And evidence comes in layers: what people saw, what cameras captured, and what sensors measured. A single blurry video can feel convincing, but by itself, it rarely proves anything. Because motion is tricky. The camera moves, and your brain turns that into a moving object. Zoom changes scale, so speed and distance can look completely different than they really are. That's why many cases stay unresolved, not because they're magic, but because the data is incomplete. So here's our rule. We test the strongest mystery, then the strongest explanation. 3 famous cases, 1 method, 2 sides, and only the evidence gets the final word. Case 1. The Nimitz encounter. Over open water, trained eyes notice something unusually steady. At first, it's just a point of light, small, distant, easy to dismiss. But then the sensors pick it up. A track appears, and it doesn't behave the way you'd expect. Inside the cockpit, everything feels normal, until that light holds position like it's locked to the horizon. And then it moves. Not with a roar, not with a trail, just a sudden sideways shift and a stop. Here's the problem. Without a clear range, speed and distance can trick you. A far object can look impossibly fast. Still, multiple observers focus on the same spot at the same time. The ocean stays calm. No splash, no wake, no obvious clue. On the data side, more than one display seems to echo the anomaly. Enough to raise a real question, but not enough to answer it. And that's the cliff edge of these cases. You can see it, you can track it, but you can't resolve it. So we've heard the strongest strange side. Now we turn to the strongest ordinary explanations and see what survives. Countercase, the Nimitz encounter. Before anything becomes extraordinary, we test what can fool us. Distance first. Without range, a far light can look impossibly fast. Parallax next. The camera shifts, the background shifts, and motion appears. Zoom amplifies it. It compresses space and magnifies tiny shakes into big movement. Sensors can jump too. Dropouts, tracking filters, brief loss of lock. And the atmosphere matters. Haze can shimmer and bend light near the horizon. So yes, these explanations can shrink the mystery. But without raw data, they don't close the case. They only set the standard for what comes next. Case 2. The Tehran 1976 Intercept. A bright light appears over a sleeping city. Steady, prominent, impossible to ignore. Inside a control room, procedure takes over. Calls, maps, a clock that won't stop ticking. A fighter is readied. Metal, fuel, runway lights, and then the night swallows it. In the cockpit, the target sits ahead like a fixed star, except it doesn't behave like one. As the jet closes in, the light seems to intensify and shift just enough to keep the chase alive. Then something stranger. The instruments flicker. A brief disruption, and suddenly the cockpit doesn't feel reliable. A second crew member locks eyes on the same point, the same direction, confirming it's not just one person's imagination. They try to hold a clean track, but the lock slips, the signal won't stay pinned down. And then the light pulls away, upward, distant, returning to ambiguity. The jet comes home, but the questions don't. So that's the mystery as reported: a visual target, pursuit, and a moment where machines seem to falter. Now we do what we promised. We test the strongest ordinary explanations. The Countercase, the Tehran 1976 Intercept. Start with the human factor. A night intercept is stressful, and under stress, the brain will lock onto the brightest signal. A single bright object near the horizon can shimmer, pulse, and move, simply because the atmosphere is bending the light. And the cockpit isn't a perfect laboratory. Older systems can flicker, lose stability, or pick up interference without anything exotic causing it. Tracking can fail for ordinary reasons: jitter, dropouts, limits of the hardware, and the simple fact that the target's distance is unknown. Even two ordinary lights can line up, merge into one brighter point, and then separate again, creating the feeling of intelligent motion. So yes, there are realistic ways this story can happen. But here's what keeps it alive: the combination, visual pursuit, reported disruption, and the timing, all in the same night. Enough to explain parts of it, and enough to wonder about the rest. And that's the honest place to leave it. Not solved, not proven, just a question that refuses to go quiet. Case 3. The Phoenix Lights, 1997. A normal neighborhood night, until people look up and stop talking. At first, it's a single bright point, small, distant, easy to misjudge. Then more lights appear, spaced out in a clean formation, moving far too calmly to ignore. Someone zooms in, and the image gets worse. Shake, noise, focus hunting, exactly where certainty disappears. But the line holds. It keeps drifting, steady enough to feel deliberate. From the horizon, the lights seem to change brightness, as if distance, haze, or angle is playing tricks. More witnesses step outside. Different angles, different cameras, different memories. And suddenly, the same event becomes many stories. And that's what makes this case powerful. It wasn't one person, it was a city looking up. Still, the footage never gives you the one thing you want: a clear, measurable object. So the mystery remains, exactly as it was that night. Lights in formation, and a question that doesn't fade with them. Countercase, the Phoenix Lights, 1997. First, the strength. Thousands of people can't share one hallucination. Something happened in that sky. But what happened can still be debated. Distant lights over a ridge can look perfectly organized when depth is missing. Illumination flares can hang, drift, and fade, creating a line that feels deliberate from far away. And home cameras from 1997 don't help. Zoom amplifies shake, autofocus hunts, exposure breathes, turning simple motion into something that looks intelligent. Different streets, different angles, partial obstructions, and one event becomes many descriptions. So yes, there are realistic pathways to a formation of lights, but the witness count raises the bar. You can't dismiss this with a lazy answer. And without measurable data, range, altitude, true speed, the case stays exactly where it hurts most: plausible, but not settled, ordinary, or something else. So where does that leave us? Across decades, there are too many reports from too many places to pretend nothing is happening. At the same time, unexplained isn't alien. Most mysteries shrink when better data arrives. The real gap is measurement. Range, altitude, speed, and raw sensor logs, the kind of evidence science can test. And that gap may not last forever. As more records open, we might finally separate noise from something truly new. Until then, the honest answer is simple. There's evidence of unknowns, but no final proof of visitors. Now I want to hear from you. If you've ever had an experience you can't explain, share it in the comments.